Okay, the last of these little segments is on the Non-Designer's Design Book, Chapter 5, The Element of Contrast. Uh, Robin Williams notes that this is probably the most fun, and it should be the most dramatic. Contrast is important because, as she says, it draws your eyes, your audience's eyes, to where you want them to go. Uh, Not just to attract attention to your piece, that's important, but also once they're looking at a document, you, through contrast, control how they look at it or where their eyes go as they scan it. She also emphasizes that if there is contrast, make it, the difference is very different. You wouldn't want to mix together two fonts, say, that are sans serif fonts like Tahoma and Verdana, which are different, but they're somewhat similar also. You want bold differences. Same thing with size contrast. You wouldn't want to have a 12-point font for headings and 11-point font for body text. You need to make it 14-point and 10. Let's see, this first slide, it's not important that you be able to read those headings on the right, but first, it really is more attractive and appealing through the greater contrast between the title and the bulk of the text. But here's an example of how the contrast pulls our eyes through the document. I mean, naturally, that's where you look first, the largest thing that stands out the most. Then you probably scan to the other headings, one through the other. And as she notes on this page, you can't see it, it's cropped out here, but I'm going to read from the top of page 77. Says, don't be afraid to make some items small to create a contrast with the larger items, and don't be afraid to allow blank space. Once you pull the readers in with the focal point, they will read the smaller print if they are interested. If they're not interested, it won't matter how big you set it. I think that's really an important principle to keep in mind, especially with items that are, I mean, not documents to be read by executives, but things that are trying to catch the eye of the public, flyers or announcements, brochures, that kind of thing. Your audience doesn't have to read those kinds of things, and if they don't find it something that applies to them or looks interesting, they won't. So putting the small print in small print is perfectly fine, and even preferable if it allows you to get greater contrast with the larger elements that will help them decide whether or not they want to read. Look at these two, as she asks, if you were standing in front of a a rack with 40, 50 cards, and you're just scanning through them, which one of these would get your attention? Which one of these would you be more likely to pick out of the rack and take a look at? Let's say, for consistency, they all have to do with Shakespeare or literature in some way. And then, as she says here with these two examples, be bold. Be bold. Don't be a wimp, she says repeatedly throughout this book. So look at the contrast that jumps off the page here. Hug's Pie Shop. It's interesting there, but this is in your face. The larger image, the greater contrast here in repeating. This is the element of repetition too. The font from the title. It's obviously of these two, which one would you look at? And then I've kind of cut this off, cropping, but if you see, I have some stars and whatnot. So while we're here, I will read you the text there. She says, let go of Times New Roman and Arial Helvetica. Just eliminate them from your font choices. Please let go of sand as well. Let go of a centered alignment. I know it's hard to do, but you must do it for now. Later you can experiment with it again. And man, if you look in magazines, center alignment is used. But I think what she's trying to do is to get people to push themselves out of that comfort zone and as she explains in the book at length, there are cases where centered alignment is most appropriate. While I'm reading, I'll do one more. Find the most interesting or most important item on the page and emphasize it. In this case, the most interesting is the pie and the most important is the name of the shop. Keep the most important things together so a reader doesn't lose the focus. Group the information into logical groups. Use space to set items apart or to connect them, not boxes. All right, well, here again on the PowerPoint, maybe you can see this on screen, the summary of these elements. There's a whole lot more to this book, especially when it comes to many of these same elements, but specifically with type. She has a good chapter on color. I didn't draw your attention to those this week. We have a ton to do already. But on your own, in our remaining weeks, I would certainly read what she says about color and at least skim through what she says about type and font. It might seem really dry and boring, but as you see, she's really not a dry and boring writer, and she shares valuable information that will help you as professionals. All right.